So today I want to bring this back to my conspiratorial roots. The U.S. debt clock, the national debt clock, has been updated recently into a new format that shows some really interesting things. And if we look at the changes that it has had, I think it'll be really obvious how it goes a lot in line with the larger economic things that I've talked about on here that are certainly more conspiratorial as well, but I think they have a lot of facts behind them. In all honesty, and I'll get farther into that. So I guess just so everyone's warned here, this won't be heavily crypto, but it does fall in line with the Project Sandman information that I've put out twice now, and I will link to each of those in the description. One of those I think got shared on Twitter about a month or a month and a half ago, and it got a lot of hits. So I think that it's I think that it's an important topic to talk about because it does impact us in crypto as well, and I will make that connection too. So, without further ado, I will come back into this, but I want to talk about what brought it to my attention and why it did. So, there are certain words that I won't say on here just because I really don't know what's acceptable online that won't get me flagged anymore. So this will be an experiment. But this XX account is someone that I follow very closely, and I don't take everything as I use it to connect what I'm interested in to a lot of other things. And it's very heavily numerology based, and I certainly think that there are things in economics and politics worldwide that use numerology as kind of a communication code, but I'm not at the point where I believe that the numerology actually controls events. I'm at the point right now where I think that numerology is used as kind of a code amongst the elites to coordinate things so that they can profit off of them and that they can know what is coming next. If you're interested more in numerology and how it pertains to crypto, I would follow Waters Above. He has amassed a really interesting following over the last 2 years or so. But this tweet got me checking into it again just because it popped up along with all of the other U.S. debt clock tweets online. If you don't know, there's a pretty interesting conspiracy, even though I don't really think it's a conspiracy, that in September of 2001, on or around the 11th of that month, there was 2.3 trillion that went missing and that went reported, but it got quickly swept away with all of the other news that happened as a result of that time. And it was very connected to building number 7 in New York. So if you're interested in that, you can look into it. And the interesting thing, 2.3 trillion, 2023. I mean, there's some numerology there, but I don't know enough to really quote unquote decode it on my own. But if we continue here, now we're talking about the actual debt clock itself. So there's a lot of numerology that XX also talks about as well between 133 and 331. The inverse of things is important. So the 331 comes into play because we were about to hit 33.1 trillion on our U.S. national debt, and it was interesting where we hit 33.1 trillion at about 1:33 on the actual time c- c- clock as well. That 133 and 331 tie into a lot of things. If you're interested, check out 223 and 322. That's also another really interesting connection that I won't get into here for a lot of long term concerns of mine. But there's been a lot of conspiracy with BRICS and gold and silver and all of these countries that are wanting to move away from the USD. Hypothetically, if they all decided at once to stop using it, then the dollar would essentially become worthless overnight. Overnight, I don't think will actually mean in one night. I think it will mean in a relatively short amount of time. And I think we're already seeing that, honestly, and I can point to that on charts as well. The most interesting updates to the actual debt clock itself, in my opinion, have to do with gold and silver. And while those were on the old one, it's much more prominent now. So here's another one. So this actually captures the the old arrangement and the new one as well. So if we look at this, we can see. Okay, so I take that back. This is the old one. This new one is on there now. It has a lot more interesting information, and I'll point to a couple of these and how I think the trends that are now happening are very opposite of what you might expect from a normal debt calculation. So there's been a lot of attention on this on X or Twitter. I still refer to it as Twitter a lot. Apparently, it went live for a bit and then it went back, but now this new one is actually live again. But one of the largest things that is obvious is that there's these bricks and gold fields in there as well. I don't listen to digital perspectives as much anymore, or the digital asset advisor as well, just because I think they kind of talk about the same thing all of the time. And I did learn a lot out of each of them, but I'm interested in more things than just XRP and Ethereum now. But I think this is a really interesting tweet by Brad Kimes as well. This site is not it is not an official U.S. Government site. However, it does have some very interesting information on there, and some very interesting correlations with other much more conspiratorial things that I listen to and pay attention to outside of crypto as well. Not as much, because I don't think we're waiting on a massive movement by secret good guys that are all working together across the world to overnight expose evil and corruption. I'm just not at that point. I just don't think that's how humans actually work, which is probably a little bit jaded of me, but I think it's also the mature approach as well, and it prevents me from being caught up in a conspiratorial movement, and it helps me to actually take action for myself on the things that I can take action in. And I believe that right now that is primarily in crypto and physical silver, which I am fairly well set for certain events that I think are eventually likely to play out with each of those categories of assets. And that's all I'll say on that at this time. But yeah, I'm interested in that. So let's talk about the actual debt clock now itself. So the most interesting things are that the dollar to silver ratio now, we're sitting at $0 per ounce. if you look at, let me bring up that old one over here. So that's always pretty much been the same. I I have a hard time latching onto that too much, just because um, if you look at the paper, which is like the silver that's traded on the exchanges and stuff, that's basically worthless. That's not actual physical silver, right? So the US dollar to silver ratio now is the year over year increase in the US M2 supply divided by the yearly world production of silver in ounces. So, really, why it is zero, not too sure, other than maybe it's because we have an imaginary value in the USD itself. So, essentially, the US dollar to silver, um, you're basically dividing zero by, a number, which results in zero. So they also added the BRICS part down here too, which is interesting because this is basically the BRICS nations GDP to to their reported combined gold holdings in ounces. So this is essentially representing what the price per ounce of gold would be if BRICS actually did use a gold-backed currency, which would not be ours, which would mean that the US dollar would not be being used anymore, which is, I think it is inevitable, but I don't think it'll be where no one actually uses it for anything. I just think that the US dollar won't be number one anymore, which will still severely impact us over here as Americans and in our economy. But I think that that's inevitable. Um, so the same thing kind of conveys over to silver, because there's some speculation out there, and this is much more conspiratorial, that the true value of silver is basically, or it has been so heavily manipulated, because if the market value of silver was actually true, it would be much, much, much more expensive, and that would make the manufacturing of pretty much all electronics much, much more expensive. So there is some conspiracy behind that. If you're interested, check into what J.P. Morgan has gotten in trouble for with that. I think that's a really interesting topic if you are interested in that. But a couple of the things that I thought were weird. The U.S. dollar supply is negative right now. So that's the year over year change in U.S. M2 money supply. So that's basically saying that there's less money in circulation now than a year ago. But then there's some other things on here that were moving opposite of what you might expect. And I'm trying to remember where they were, but if you poke around here often enough, and I apologize, I didn't have it in front of me, but I spent a lot of time in front of this and had a couple of other things happening today. So, yeah, I don't have it all here, but the point is that there are trends on here that are moving kind of suspiciously, and it all points to some quote unquote grand conspiracy. In my opinion, I think it ties into my whole Project Sandman idea, where the world basically decides to not use our currency anymore. And in all honesty, I wouldn't hold it against them, because I don't trust, well, I won't say that on here yet, but I wouldn't necessarily trust it either. So another couple of interesting things. There's a lot more categories here now. If you look at the crypto part, which is new, the dollar to crypto ratio now is $18.35. The dollar to crypto ratio back in 2013 was 9,099. So that is basically the US M2 money supply divided by the total market cap of all crypto. So it would make sense because you have a much larger crypto market cap now. So I'm not really too alarmed by that in its outright. But there are some very interesting things here. So if we poke around at gold and silver, I'm going to see if this pops up. There are some correlations here. So in all honesty, I'm the most particularly interested in silver just because it does have a much more industrial use case than gold. There's a lot of silver used in solar power technologies, which I don't really think are all that efficient. But I'll probably get in trouble if I say that too often on here. And there is a really interesting infographic by XX that relates different X cryptocurrencies to different precious metals. And I have a couple of posts saved in there, so I'll probably expand upon that. But that essentially means XRP is gold, XLM is silver, XDC was copper, just things like that. And I don't really know if that means it's literal or not, but I do want to check into that a little bit more again. But ultimately, I don't really think that we're in the midst of some grand conspiracy coming to light. I do think that to a certain extent things are happening that we aren't aware of. I mean, obviously, we're just a bunch of peasants, right? So we won't know until it's been chosen to be made public by the elites in power. But I thought this was a really interesting tweet by XX because all of the markets generally move in the same kind of patterns. And that's just because the markets are so heavily controlled by trading algorithm. Excuse me. I do everything 100% live on one take, so you just ended up having a burp in there. But the markets, and even more so for crypto, in my own opinion, they're so heavily controlled by trading algorithms, and the huge people and entities control those algorithms and control where the market goes, and then use news to justify it. Very rarely does actual news change the market itself. That's a little bit more common when the Fed is coming out and announcing interest rates and things like that, which I will touch on here in a little bit. But if you look, all of these patterns are almost the exact same. So what I take out of that is that unless you're choosing and researching and putting your time and effort into specific projects, if you're just trying to use index funds, then you are very likely to accrue wealth over time, but you're not going to hit it big if you just do what everyone else does, and if you just do what the quote-unquote experts say. So I know that was a bit of a rant, and if you're more interested in this, I can expand upon a couple of things. Just put it in a comment. But I want to tie this back to what we're most interested in too. So if you look, the price of Bitcoin, we're not really changed over a week. It did go up to like 27.5 or something like that, and everyone was all excited, but then it just went right back down. The same thing with just about everything else on the top, I don't know, 50 assets or so. So I don't really care. I'm accruing the tokens of the projects that I like, which are XRP, XLM, HBAR, XDC, Casper, even Algo. I want to get into Corium as well, and a couple of other things that I just haven't gotten around to purchasing yet. But I also want to take a look at at the major stock indices, right? So let's take a look at the NASDAQ. Okay. So over the last, okay, we're on in a daily time frame, right? So as you can see, in general, when the DXY, which is the relative strength of the US dollar compared to other currencies, is increasing, then the value of the stock market will go down. That's even more important for crypto just because it's a much more volatile asset, right? So we go up here, down here, up here, and it just kind of it just goes together most of the time. Now, I do think that our economy is so jacked up and it's so artificially propped up that it doesn't really matter anymore. And I don't really have a lot in the traditional markets other than my 401k, just because I get a match contribution in there, and why not if it didn't mine? But it's I just bring it up because, and now let's check out the Dow Jones. Let me Dow. I'm just trying to find a good one that makes sense without all of this other crap. Yeah, sure. Let's do this one and see what it says. Oh, well, that's weird. Yeah, I don't even know what the hell that is. But if we go to just a normal chart here somewhere online, because that was way too oh my god. All right, let's see if I'm actually a robot, guys. I think that's a palm tree in the background. I don't know. Okay, so if we go back over 5 days, we had some Fed announcements. We tanked. We're generally unchanged over a month. Up about what? 7% over 6 months. Year to date, up a little bit. 1 year. I just think that for everything else I talked about here and what I talk about more in my two Project Sandman videos, I also talk a lot talk about BRICS a lot. I think that we're being artificially propped up just because, and when interest rates come down, because it will, then the markets will pump again because there's nowhere else to go to actually get a return on investment. Then when the crypto bull run wants to happen, whether it's from a lot of ETF approvals or it's from regulatory clarity and a subsequent utility token bull run. I don't know when it's going to happen, 2024, 2025. But right now, we can't control anything. So I don't really look into the numerology aspect a lot. I just accrue what I think is a good project, and I'm okay with holding it for quite a while. So just check into this national debt clock and experiment with what things mean, what the trends are, and the changes. And I think you'll find some pretty interesting correlations in things. So I went long here, but I'm a conspiracy guy. I'm a red pill guy. I like to question everything, and this is essentially what connects everything, and part of why I'm so interested in crypto, because I think it's an amazing opportunity to be able to outperform everyone else who's only interested in more traditional assets.